It's another Salt City Hoops. I hope you're all doing very well today. The NBA draft just finished. Let's talk about what the Utah Jazz did or didn't do in this very pivotal offseason for the Jazz to eventually become a great team again. It's all got to start for the draft with the draft for the Utah Jazz, and I'm here riding solo with you today to talk about these very exciting players that the Jazz have drafted over the past 2 days. My name is Mark Russell Pereira. You can find me in the show notes and such if you want to yell at me after this, during this, wherever you want to find me. The Jazz have so much excitement now to build on based on the players that they brought in. Mainly one player, but I think there's definitely stuff worth talking about with the second round draft pick and the undrafted two-way that the Jazz have already signed. And I want to get right into it and talk to you all about my emotions, my feelings on the Jazz drafting Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr., and then we'll get into the second round draft pick of John Tonje, who was drafted 53rd or 54th. I forget exactly what the pick is, and the undrafted free agent RJ Lewis from St. John's. But talking about Ace Bailey is going to be what we're going to want to really focus on today, huh? So the story, if you haven't heard, just to recap kind of where we're at, is Ace Bailey was a little bit of a mercurial pre-draft individual. He declined working out for the Philadelphia 76ers, who were picking third, and it was leaked in various different outlets that he wanted to play somewhere where he was going to get a lot of ball touches or perhaps freedom to explore his game and become a star early on. And because of the quality of the teams or the rosters of the teams who have kind of jumped higher up in the draft, you're looking at perhaps downgrading his potential draft area where he was going to get chosen as a very high quality prospect and trying to maybe get his way drafted past the Jazz, but actually getting drafted by Washington at 6th or New Orleans at 7th or Brooklyn at 8th. And you didn't want to be stuck behind Tyrese Maxey and Paul George perhaps in Philadelphia, let alone Joel Embiid as far as commanding touches. Charlotte who was picking 4th ahead of Utah, has LaMelo Ball, has Brandon Miller, is kind of thinking about different ways to build their team that doesn't necessarily involve a player like Ace Bailey. And we'll get into the type of player Ace Bailey is, but for the purposes of this discussion, swingman 3-4 scorer type, right? Wing, big wing, medium wing. Feel like I'm describing buffalo sauces for you. And Utah wasn't necessarily considered a bad or good option, but it definitely was considered that this is a guy who his agent wanted him to be in a place where he would have more space to grow. Now, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. It's pretty obvious that Utah is not going to be a place where these mercurial, I want to be a superstar type players, outgoing personalities, that Utah is not going to be a place where these types of players gravitate. They want to be in a big market, they want to be the star of the show and that sort of thing. But as we've seen time and time again, especially over the past 10 years or so, Utah is becoming an increasingly popular place for players that they gravitate to, that agents actually do push them to. But so a lot of this pre-draft process was like, oh, Ace Bailey's trying to not play in Utah. Utah's one of the places like Philadelphia with their roster glut and Charlotte with their franchise situation and their roster that he doesn't want to go to. In Utah, well, they got all that glut of ball handlers in front of Ace Bailey. He doesn't want to go there. Also, the common silly tropes, Utah sucks. Right? And so he was clearly angling. And let me actually back up for a second. Anytime I mention anything about what Ace Bailey is or wants or whatever, this has been a big source of conflict over the past 3 days, because the only person who has been doing any of this angling has been his agent. His agent is Omar Cooper, and because if you haven't heard that name before, it's because you haven't. That redundancy is brought to you by the fact that he has no other NBA clients. This is a gentleman whose son was a 2022 graduate, had a cup of coffee in the NBA, Sharif Cooper, and based on connections between Omar Cooper and Ace Bailey from the AAU days or early high school days, Ace Bailey is pretty much stuck with this gentleman all through deciding on Rutgers, right? There was probably a big fat NIL check involved there, I'm sure. And so this Omar Cooper gentleman seems to be, he's operating very much behind the scenes. I couldn't even find a photo of him when I was trying to look for information on this agent, and it's not even sure if he's a registered NBA agent. Looking at the information I had, I couldn't identify his name, so somebody has to be an NBA agent, even if it's yourself. But it was not. I couldn't find any information on Omar Cooper as an agent. He could just be a player manager, whatever. Either way, he's kind of like Kawhi Leonard's uncle. He's the guy calling the shots, right? He is the one declining these workouts, doing this angling to try to get Ace Bailey the place that he feels that Ace Bailey belongs. And anytime you talk to Ace Bailey, saying me, it's not like I've talked to him personally, but anytime the media has reported on interactions with Ace Bailey, both before the draft and after the draft, he's been his typical outgoing, very gregarious, almost he almost has like a silly personality, very, very fun personality. On being willing to play anywhere, put in the work. He has a very good attitude about playing anywhere and being a leader, being a young leader that builds up people. And then after Ace Bailey gets drafted by Utah, he's expressing, I wouldn't say overwhelming excitement to be drafted by the John Stockton, Karl Malone franchise or anything like that. But that the same is true for 99% of draft picks and the teams that they end up going to. He was effusive in just his desire to get to work and get to Utah. Like, he knows that the draft is what it is, and he made several comments to the effect of, oh, anything to do with the pre-draft workout, off the court stuff, I'm just letting my family and management take care of that. All I do is, I show up and hoop. That's what I do, right? And even during day 2 of the NBA draft, the ESPN draft expert Jonathan Gavoni says something like, Utah wasn't where Ace Bailey wanted to go, right? And there has been no contact between Omar Cooper and the Jazz or what have you. And it's implying that, is Ace Bailey somehow just not going to show up in Utah? What's going on here? And both Andy Larson and Sarah Todd from our wonderful beat reporters for the Jazz, for the Tribune and Deseret News, respectively, they both said, he's been engaged with the media. Ace Bailey has, I should clarify, and he's gonna show up on, over the weekend in Salt Lake City with the rest of the draft picks, and we'll do a press conference Monday, Tuesday, just like we did last year. Like Avery Bradley, the VP of, I think, player development or player personnel for the Utah Jazz. The one and the same Avery Bradley, by the way. Danny Ainge connection for sure. He said, I expect there's nothing unusual going on here. We've made contact. They'll be here over the weekend. We'll do a press release. We'll do a press conference. So there's a bunch of stereotypes going on around right now about a mercurial, fun player apparently not wanting to play in Utah. That's all horseshit. It's all horseshit right now. So if you're listening to this wondering, like, what's this all about, Ace Bailey refusing workouts, maybe it's perhaps that his agent, manager, what have you, was trying to angle to find a way to get him to Washington. Okay, this is not a level of player that can just force his way to just not play for the Jazz. This is, you can have a preferred destination. There's frankly nothing wrong with that. I really don't have an issue with, just like Steph Curry didn't, I don't think Steph Curry worked out for the Warriors. Steph Curry certainly didn't work out for the he refused to work out for the Timberwolves, and we see how that one worked out, right? Timberwolves drafted every point guard but Steph Curry in that draft. And so this is a player who has had preferences on going to Washington or New Orleans or Brooklyn. I'll get to that in a moment. And instead, Utah said, look, we're going to take the third most talented player in the draft, perhaps the second most talented player in the draft. Before the collegiate season, if there was anyone who was going to threaten Cooper Flag status as the number one overall draft pick, it was going to be Ace Bailey. He had an up and down year, which we'll get to his on-court stuff in a minute as well. But this is an amazingly talented player, and Utah said, look, if he's falling to fifth because Philadelphia doesn't trust him and Charlotte wants a more reliable pick in Con Knipple that they drafted at 4, then we are the worst team in the NBA. We're going to bet on talent here. And this is not a guy who is going to be up in arms about coming to Utah. Nah, man, his agent was just trying to get him to a different place. So there's nothing to be alarmed about. Couple points on his agent's maneuvering. Apparently, New Orleans was a place that he would be satisfied with Ace Bailey going to. I've never heard a single fucking agent say that the New Orleans Pelicans in their current state of disarray is like, oh, that's a preferred destination. Anyone who knows me personally knows that I adore New Orleans. It's my favorite city in the world. I've been several times. I find it incredibly fun, and I would actually love to be drafted by a professional sports team in New Orleans. The problem is everything associated with the franchise is F tier right now. The facilities are garbage. The stadium is the worst in the NBA. The ownership clearly isn't trying to spend anything. Oh, and management is clearly showing ineptitude, even in the early stages of their current new management. The David Griffin era has not gone well. Zion Williamson clearly hates it there. And there's been, I think, some signs over the past 4 to 6 months that Zion Williamson is turning over a new leaf to be the face of the franchise. And then we get allegations of rape and sexual assault in Zion Williamson. So everything associated with Zion is toxic right now. The entire franchise does not seem to have the desire to put any money into the success of the players. Common trope is, ownership is at a massive advantage to the NBA because the salary cap is what it is, but if ownership is willing to pay for things like coaches and management, medical staffs, practice facilities, training tables, like just everything that makes the existence of being a professional athlete easy and fun, not just the money in the end of the bank, that's going to be theirs forever, but just like your time in the NBA as a good place, that's something New Orleans is not doing right now. Everything associated with the Pelicans, as much as I really respect the city, and I actually love the name New Orleans Pelicans. I do, and the fans and the reporters I know, I like them, but you cannot deny the state of the franchise as feeling like you are in the bowels of a football stadium built in the 80s where everything is like this gray concrete. It feels damp and you can see something dripping off the wall, but you don't know what it is. That feels like the Pelicans franchise. So for an agent to say, oh yeah, we're really trying to get Ace Bailey there, which by the way, you'd be stuck behind, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones and Zion Williamson, and as far as ball handling duties, they got DeJounte Murray. Like what are we doing here? That does not compute. Washington, I could kind of get, although and they have some slightly new management recently. I think that could be an interesting situation. But he's going to Utah. The other part of perhaps not going to Utah, besides the Utah-ness of it all, which anyone listening to this podcast is going to roll their eyes about it, and I will too. I think it's overrated. And as I said at the top of the show, I think agents of experienced players or young players trying to perhaps recraft their career are looking at the wonderful ownership spend in Utah for amazing practice facilities, very good coaching, and a place to focus on basketball without being accosted every time you leave your house. And as folks like Jordan Clarkson can show, like you can have a life outside of Utah, man. Like this is your basketball town, and you're going to be rich enough to do whatever the hell you want outside of Utah. And players like Chris Dunn and even Luka Samanic, right? Like they have reclaimed a new era to their careers and gotten a few extra $1 million that they wouldn't have had before because of the good basketball situation in Utah. It is very player first. Same thing with Oklahoma City too, by the way. Like, yeah, they have amazing players. That goes without saying, but it's pretty clear that they spend a ton on facilities and training staffs and that sort of thing, so that like the players who are living in Oklahoma City don't feel like they're just in the middle of the plains hating life. Like they're doing what they can to make the players' lives professional and enjoyable. So if you take away the Utah-ness of it all, the on-court barriers may appear numerous for Ace Bailey, but they all get washed away so quickly. So Ace Bailey is going to be kind of like a tweener 3-4-ish. I've heard some people say he projects absolutely as a 4. I think he projects more as like a small forward, especially in the current state of the Jazz at least. And perhaps in some lineups he could operate as a big 2. I think he's got a lot of versatility just as his offensive skill set. Defense is kind of a different story. Colin Sexton's on an expiring contract and doesn't really have a ton of organizational clout. They gave him an extension of, it was a sign and trade type of situation for Sexton, so there was a little bit of a buy-in, but he's still an expiring contract. John Collins just opted into, I think it was like a $26 million player option, but he's on an expiring contract. Lauri Markkanen is Lauri Markkanen. Jordan Clarkson is also an expiring contract, and he's also bad at basketball. Keontae George is bad at basketball, had a worse second season than his first season. I think some other folks would dispute that, but he had a bad second season. And even if you would say it's slightly better than its first season, you want to see actual, like, tangible improvement there. And to just be static and not really have a lot of improvement between the years either, I have a lot of pessimism on Keontae George. But he's also a guy who was drafted in the middle of the first round. That's not organizational clout. If there is any sort of dispute as to who has more organizational clout between the number 5 pick and the number 13 or 15 pick, whatever Keontae George was, I don't know how to finish that sentence. It's just there's no dispute between the two, like just based on draft position alone, let alone with the latter pick being someone who has not exactly flashed a ton of long-term potential, right? Had a nice, like, creatively interesting rookie season, but just all the things that were horrible in his rookie season were still there in his sophomore season. So there's no clout there. And Isaiah Collier is just a pure non-shooting, kind of projects as a backup point guard kind of guy. So there is absolutely a way that Utah is retooling in a nanosecond around Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey is the focus right now. So I am not going to hear any discussion about that. Or if I was to talk to Ace Bailey's manager, agent, mystery gentleman, that there's some sort of barrier to playing time in Utah. Utah needs actual players who can score the ball, and he immediately fills that role. Jordan Clarkson's bad, Keontae George is bad, and this offseason is going to have some reshuffling of some deck chairs. And if I know Will Hardy is, will claim, no free minutes around here. But if the choice is between Keontae George fucking up or Ace Bailey fucking up, I tell you where the organizational clout's going to go there. Okay? So, absolutely going to be no question there. So there's a wide opening for Ace Bailey playing time. I don't know if he's going to start from day one, but I think by January he will be a 30-minute per game guy. So, get all the off-the-court stuff out of the way. Obviously, his agent manager was trying to get him somewhere outside of the top 5. But I don't think that necessarily means, that means he's not showing up. And if you're listening to this before the end of the weekend, Ace Bailey's going to end up at the press conference on Monday or Tuesday or whatever it is. Right? He's not going to hold out. So that's ridiculous. So Ace Bailey, the player, we're talking about all this mercurial, this guy has a personality. Perhaps you're a little bit turned off. Let's be real clear. Ace Bailey is fucking awesome. I feel like I'm swearing a lot today because I'm jazzed up about the Jazz draft pick today. He's absolutely terrific. So there's a lot of things about his profile that you can really wash away a lot of the warts just by understanding context. So this is a guy who comes in as a 6'6" forward. I think I'm getting that height right. But like I said, we're going to talk about more of he's a 6'6" guy, and just get his 6'7.5", 203 pounds. So he's a little bit taller than I initially said, and he's going to be finishing his just 1 year at Rutgers with Dylan Harper, who went second to the San Antonio Spurs. Rutgers was a miserable basketball team this year, despite having 2 top 5 picks and perhaps the second and third best NBA talents in the country. It was pretty dumbfounding. If you were watching the box scores, you're wondering how come Rutgers ain't worth anything. This doesn't make any sense. Clearly, both Harper and Bailey are not as good as we thought. They are not the problem. The rest of that roster was super butt in performance, and they could have been like an 8-win team without Harper and Bailey. So playing with absolutely miserable teammates on the floor, players dropping passes all the time and everything. So the quality of Rutgers basketball, I think you can wash away a little bit. Ace Bailey is the type of guy who he's like a finesse player in the body of a very, very, very good athlete. The best way I would describe his tape is a guy who has all the physical tools and a pure, lovely jump shot, and just finding ways to be like, no one else on this team is really going to do anything, especially if, Harper's kind of more of like a definitely like a point forward type, kind of orchestrating these things. So if Bailey is operating something, he's also an on-ball scorer, and he's got no help around him. So he's operating this like finesse game where he's kind of jacking up a ton of awful shots and around 4 defenders, and he would attempt these miserable looking floaters from time to time. He would take these awkward leaning layups that never went in. So you would watch film after film after film of Ace Bailey just making horrendous shooting choices on the court. And so it's a level of engagement issue. You're wondering, hey, is this a guy that is really going to understand how to play in the NBA level? Like, he has all these immense tools, but is he going to actually learn how to play in more of an NBA context? And obviously, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee one way or another. And he's not the most gifted passer in the world, but he has a little bit of vision to get the ball out of his hands a little bit. But who is he passing to in Rutgers? Like, there was no one to pass to. And so then you just look at everything that he's doing well. He has great rise on just the most effortless jumper, perhaps in the entire draft. He's got this huge size, and when he does decide to attack the rim on certain, like when he actually has an opening, he gets to the rim when he actually decides to be assertive. So I think coaching that assertiveness is going to be good. Otherwise, yeah, he's settling for a bunch of mid-range jumpers or isolation step-back jumpers. And there's not a better difficult shot maker in the draft than him. And he's got all the size and tools to be more of a well-rounded, appropriate NBA scorer. Like, absolutely. I just think it's going to be... There's no way that he is going to get appropriate NBA coaching and still keep that shot diet. Like, he is going to instead transform into a very, very competent wing offensive player. A little bit of sketchy dribbling, can't really dribble left. I mentioned his passing. I think he kind of understands where to pass the ball. He just didn't feel like it. Because he did have some occasional great passes in transition and such. Actually kind of a horrible transition finisher himself. So it's like all these warts that I keep bringing up about his stats and everything that I just feel like I'm just going to wash it away into team context. Very, very, very similar, I think. And these are not going to be two good comparisons. Or comparisons that'll make Jazz fans smile. But both Markelle Fultz and Ben Simmons, you could see their obvious talent on how well they could play basketball on truly, truly awful college basketball teams. And I think Washington was a little bit better for Fultz than LSU was for Simmons, but they were both bad teams. And it's the same thing when you're watching Ace Bailey. It's just like you're watching all these amazing things that he does, and it'll be interspersed between stretches of just horrific basketball because no one else on the team is really being relied on to create, do anything, whatever. His decision making is going to be a little bit off, but I just feel like that's all coaching. That's all between the ears. I think that can be done. Because you can't discount the quality of what he does as a jump shooter, what he does as a manipulator of a defense, and I just think he's got good instincts on scoring. And if I'm putting that around guys like Sexton and Markkanen and whatever, I think there's going to be some tremendous, the ceiling is the roof type of potential for him. So, and he's also, I think he's just turning 19. Yes, he's going to turn 19 in August. So super, super young dude. I don't know if he reclassified to be younger coming into the draft, but this is so young. So yeah, 6'7.5" with a 7-foot wingspan, has a 9-foot standing reach. He's a he's not an explosive FU athlete, but he's a very, very good athlete. Defensively, had 1.5 blocks a game and a steal per game. And just like his offense, his defense is like, when he's engaged, he's a nightmare. He's a nightmare out there. It was hard to find him engaged. And unlike poorly engaged defenders of the Keontae Georges of the world, he gave a shit enough on enough possessions with a much better size, wingspan, and defensive instincts that you can immediately coach this guy into a real player. He absolutely took possessions off, especially if you were watching Ace Bailey on defense and the guy he was guarding just like wasn't a threat. He didn't turn around and say, oh, the guy I'm guarding isn't going to move or isn't a threat, so how can I help my team and be more disruptive defensively? No. He just kind of stuck to the assignment and took the play off because he knew he didn't have to try too hard. It's all between the ears for Ace Bailey. Cool name. Amazingly buttery offensive player who can make ridiculously tough shots. He settles for a mid-range a lot, but he has too much athleticism and guile and skill that any sort of decent coaching can't get him into more of a better shot profile. Just an incredible shooter. from all three levels. I just think he's pretty great. And the Jazz should be thrilled about this. We should all be very, very thrilled. So I just didn't, on our pre-draft show, we spent a lot of time talking about Jeremiah Fears, simply because I didn't think Ace Bailey would be available at 5. But he was always my third-rated prospect. I just think that it's terrific that he landed in Utah. I thought it was going to go VJ Edgecombe at 3, which he did go at 3. And I thought Charlotte was going to take Ace Bailey. Or Washington was going to make a trade with Charlotte to jump Utah there. And none of that happened. Charlotte made the safe pick with Knipple. We don't have to relitigate Knipple's skill, and we'll see what happens this year. And I'm just thrilled that Utah got an immensely high talent. We haven't had this sort of talent in the building besides Lowry Markkanen since the Mitchell and Gobert trades. And even Markkanen is a former lottery pick, but he's a different kind of blue chip player. With Ace Bailey is a chance to be a top 10 player in the NBA. I'm not exaggerating. Like, that's what I'm talking about with his offensive skill and defense. I think, like I mentioned, his defense has a lot of potential too. He has the overall profile of possible first, second team All NBA kind of guy. Cooper Flagg's path to that is more certain than Ace Bailey for sure. But as I mentioned earlier, if there's one player who could have challenged for the number 1 overall pick, it would have been Ace Bailey if he had just a wild season. And he did not. He had the season you would expect out of Rutgers basketball. I saw someone say today that they feel bad for Rutgers' other teammates and then Harper or Bailey because they just wanted to go to a D1 school and play D1 basketball and have a nice time. And now there's all these clips, hundreds and thousands of clips of them absolutely screwing up in the spotlight all the time and having a disappointing season. So you almost feel bad for them. Love the Ace Bailey pick. I'm going to digest more about him over Summer League. And I think we'll do more about that when we have the Utah Summer League and the Las Vegas Summer League to really analyze what he's got there in an NBA context. We'll see how his passing goes. We'll see how his defense goes. I'm just really excited. Then the Jazz made a little trade with Washington. We mentioned the Jazz and Washington picking at the 5-6. Well, they were also picking at the 18-21 from different trades that each team had made. And Utah trades up 3 spots with Washington, and they gave up 3 second-round picks to do so. So every spot took a second-round pick, including this year's pick, which I believe was 41st or 43rd that Utah had. And that seems like a steep price. 3 second-round picks for 3 spots from 21 to 18. Not 18 to 15 or 12 to 9, but just 21 to 18. 3 second-round picks. And I used to get really mad when teams would spill out their second-round draft picks. Like if you're playing a Sonic the Hedgehog game and all the rings start spilling out of his face if you get injured or hit by an enemy or something. But I've come to realize that the players who get drafted in the second round, they just are never anything. Occasionally you'll get some role players. Once in a moonshot, you'll get a Draymond Green or Nikola Jokic or Manu Ginobili. You might even sneak an all-star out of Chris Middleton or a Jalen Brunson. You very likely are just drafting a guy. A guy will be out of the league in 3 years or even less. And the guys who do end up being role players, they're drafted between 30 and 40. Like once you get past 40, it gets kind of sketchy. And 43 is kind of like, you're getting real dicey at the 43 to 50 range. And after 50, it's no chance. But we will talk about Tonje later. And the skills that he could provide. And then the two second round picks that we're giving up. I forget the second one, but the third second round pick is Utah's own 2032 draft pick, making it the first draft asset in 2032 that's traded. That's 7 years from now. That is 7 full ass drafts from now. That we're gonna say like this pick is gonna get routed 93 different times, and we're gonna say, oh, that was the Walter Clayton Jr. draft pick trade. That's the Walter Clayton Jr. is what led to that 2032 second round pick. So Clayton Jr. is a Rick Pitino guy. He's a 4-year senior. You most know him as the most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament, and he won a national championship for Florida this year during a senior season. So, straight up Danny Ainge style pick. Right? Now Austin Ainge, but we know Danny Ainge's fingerprints are all of this. He's a winner. Absolute winner. So, his profile we don't have any mercurial background with him, but he was a Rick Pitino guy. He was signed by Iona coming out of high school, so he played with Rick Pitino at Iona in the MAC for a couple years, and then he transferred to Florida, where he just has always been a nice, successful player. And his profile at Florida has always been, I think he's most closely aligned with a Patty Mills, Fred VanVleet, those types of players. I'm trying to think some other players in the ilk. Landry Shamet's a little taller, not as much of a on ball guy, but like this is not the biggest passer in the world, but he kind of has some combo guard, point guard skills, and he's a smaller guy at 6'2", 200. He's not tiny. He's not 5'11", 6 foot. He's not like in that range where you're really wondering about his height and everything. But he's going to be on the shorter end, and he's not pure point guard. So, and just like Patty Mills, like you could really only, the Spurs' best seasons of having Patty Mills on the team really had to rely on having other point guards being the point of attack distributor for the Spurs, whether it be Ginobili or Parker or some sort of other, or like George Hill even. So this is a 3-point marksman, right? I'm invoking Van Vliet, even though his 3-point shooting is really cratered over the past couple years. Clayton shot 39% from 3, and he is a career like 93% free throw shooter. And he just has the most consistent, reliable jumper that he gets off in a whole bunch of consistent ways. He's consistent at these jumper in a lot of different varying ways, that he's just always kind of getting to that same form. Almost, he doesn't have the same form, athleticism, whatever, as Donovan Mitchell, but I always really loved how Donovan Mitchell, no matter how fast he was moving or whatever, he was coming off and always had a very consistent form to his jumper. That reminds me a lot of Clayton. He does a lot of stuff off the dribble too, though. He's not just coming off pin downs and catch and shoot, although his catch and shoot stuff is really quite terrific. He was great at manipulating defenders off the dribble and kind of almost like finding his spot shooting. Like relocation shooting is also, he's kind of has the ball, manipulates the defender, passes it, kind of gets around. Very like, you don't want to say this name too lightly, but like the way that Steph Curry kind of manipulates a defense on and off the ball, like there was a lot of stuff that Clayton was kind of doing that with the defense. So there's a lot to love about his scoring. It's just going to be like his size, and can he be on the floor for more than just shooting, right? Because he's not going to be a guy who really finishes at the rim very well. He's not a distributor type, although he played point guard for a Florida team, right? For a national championship team. So he's not desultory from a passing standpoint. You can't just put him in there as point guard, as your point guard. He's going to profile as a backup point guard who has some microwave scoring ability. He's his efficiency went up in the clutch. It seemed like he was always playing under control. If you watch any of the Florida tape of the tournament run. It just felt like that guy was always hitting big shot after big shot, but not in like a rushed, crazy fashion. It was just like, oh, here comes Clayton to win the game for us again. Just very cool. And defensively, he's small, and it's going to be a problem. But if you watch Clayton's defensive highlights, and admittedly, I have not watched like full games of Clayton's defense to understand how it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the game. But if I watched a lengthy clip on what he can do defensively, and he is an annoying pest. Oh, he is so annoying out there. He's constantly poking balls and like predicting where base. If you do anything basic around him, like if you're just being rote with your motions, or if you're just trying to do a simple entry pass to a big man, he's just poking the ball away all the time. He does not let you get anything easy. And that is like the thing that was always missing from those Quinn Snyder defenses. We had Rudy Gobert back there and doing a great job, and you had Joe Ingles and Royce O'Neal being pretty much average point of attack defenders. But Mike Conley in his heyday, which he didn't do so much for the Quinn Snyder teams, like those teams didn't have anyone who was willing to take a lot of chances and shift the tide defensively, even though they were a poor defender, right? You don't have to be Chris Dunn out there where you're causing absolute hell for your opponent who has the ball and just making their life miserable. But if you're going to be a smaller guy or have your defensive limitations, can you provide me some David strategies? Like, can you poke the ball out? Can you use your head in creative ways to get some interesting steals? And he does that. And I think that's pretty creative. So, look, this is a guy who's going to it's going to be hard for him to become a starter in the NBA. But this is a successful draft pick for the Jazz if he becomes a 6th, 7th, 8th man. That you're like, hey, he played 15 minutes a game. And he's useful out there. Ideally, for a draft pick like that, maybe he does become a starter. Maybe he does have a nice, long, Patty Mills-esque stretch to his career. Other guys his height, you could see ways in which the stardom happens if he really does figure out 3 levels of scoring and really finishes at the rim. But it's just not his game to really get at the rim a whole lot. This is really just going to be a 3-point shooter type who has enough passing juice and feinting that he can get some layups here and there by keeping the defense on their toes or on their heels. With great shooting, but this is not a player who really projects as much more than, okay, nice little backup point guard. I'll admit before, this is one thing I said leading into the draft. I listed 5 guys I was higher on and 5 guys I was lower on, and Clayton was one of my lower on guys, right? So with the Jazz needing big swings to kind of improve the talent base of the team, I just didn't feel like drafting a 4-year undersized senior. But that being, like, I wanted to take bigger swings. But kind of looking at the players who were drafted around pick 18, 19, 20, 21, so many of these players are bigger projects than I'm willing to take on at this point, and not really a whole lot of path to successful NBA careers that I would get excited about. Whereas Clayton has an NBA skill right now from day one. And to build the next great Jazz team, you got to build it in a lot of different ways. You can't draft all superstars. You've got to be able to figure out where your role players are that are not taking up max salary money from your team. So you can kind of have a more diverse salary structure so you can build an actual cohesive team. And 2, who are not going to take a ton of attention, spotlight, whatever, away from your actual star players of like Lauri Markkanen, God willing, Ace Bailey. And so this is exactly the type of complementary player you need to build a championship team. So the quality has to come. You don't build players, step 1 to step 10. Sometimes you find step 7 in the middle of all that. And that's what Clayton is going to be, is like he's the useful player we drafted alongside Ace Bailey in 2025. And we'll go from there. So then the Jazz take all the way until 53 to draft John Tonje. So Tonje spelled Tonje. I think in Scandinavian languages it's Tonje or Tonwe, perhaps. But this is America. We're going to pronounce it Americanized. It's going to be Tonje. So I don't want to get too much into him and the undrafted 2A RJ Lewis, but I'd be doing you fine listener a disservice if we didn't talk about them a little bit. So you thought I had thoughts on a 4-year senior. How about a 6-year senior? So John Tonje is 24. Okay, so with the COVID extra eligibility plus he was a medical redshirt for a year. He's at and then he just finished 1 year at Wisconsin. So let me be more specific for you. So 4 years at Colorado State. Not recruited very much at all. Colorado State was one of only 2 D1 places that wanted him. So he spends 4 years at Colorado State, and he's okay. Okay 3-point shooter, okay free throw shooter. He's a 6'5" guy, 215 pounds, real linebacker-y presence out there almost. And after 4 years at Colorado State is when he had his medical redshirt at Missouri. And then he transferred to Wisconsin after that medical redshirt. It was, I believe it was a broken foot or something at Missouri. And at Wisconsin, he goes from being, like a 10-point-ish per game scorer at Colorado State to being a 20-point per game scorer at Wisconsin, where he's shooting 40% from 3 on a high volume. He's shooting 7 free throws a game, which is very high for college, and a 91% clip. He plays for the Cameroon national team as well. I think he played in some Olympic qualifying games, which would be interesting if Cameroon can get a team together. They have some great players. I always wish Joel Embiid classified for France or Cameroon instead of the United States. That would be a pretty interesting team. Anyways, so Sam Vecini had him rated 35th. This is the draft profile I'm reading. Sam Vecini, I think, did a great job. Even if you disagree with his rankings or whatever, just the fact that he ranked like 170 million guys and wrote profiles for everyone makes it real helpful when you're looking up things about John Tonje. So after they drafted Tonje is when I, kind of looked at a lot of his clips and everything. And he has he's a funny player to watch because if you listen to the last show, I was talking about how violent Jeremiah Fears' dribbling was and how he was always going places and manipulating the defense and decelerating and accelerating. He's so fast and whatever, and he's always just dribbling the ball real hard and doing cool things with it. John Tonje has very similar movements with the ball, except he doesn't go anywhere. He is so slow. It constantly looks like he's moving fast, but he's just got these violent movements to him, and he's just lead-footed and not really going anywhere. So he would just be, because he's a really built guy, he's not like round linebacker. He's more of like a Fred Warner type linebacker, right? So he's got some svelteness to him, but he's a powerful guy, and he's 24. He'd be beating up on these poor 18. He's a grown man at this point. And he's just getting free throw after free throw after, kind of just making these like violent, forceful actions where he's getting guys to just kind of rake their hands all over him, and he would get fouled. But he only shot 43% on layups, which is an absolutely desolatory number. And I love that he was getting to the rim and drawing fouls, but he wasn't doing it in ways that I think are repeatable in the NBA because he's just not fast enough. And I don't think he's going to be powerful enough to draw fouls and that sort of burrowing in and being a powerful player. He can certainly grow and be better than what I'm intimating here. But he was kind of a rough watch in college. He played at Wisconsin and has very, very much like a Wisconsin scoring energy of just slow and miserable and just having people rake all over him and just has a funny affect with the basketball. That said, I'm bearing the lead here. 39% three-point shooter on 6 attempts a game in college. This guy is a slower, bigger three-point shooter again. And if he can figure out the defensive side of the game, which is hard for him with his very slow-footedness, but if he deploys a very good brain about it, and like he's strong. He's a strong guy at 6'5", 6'5" linebacker type. I could really you could see the picture of perhaps like a Lou Dort type, right? Even a better shooting Lou Dort type. I think Tonje's immediate path to success is shooting the lights out of the basketball, and being on an NBA floor requires him to not be completely washed away defensively. So we'll see. Both Tonje and Clayton, good shooters, right? Very, very, very good shooters in the case of Clayton. Johnny Juzang is also only 24. And I struggle to see where Tonje would be better than Juzang right now, right? So Tonje's, you draft him, you stash him, you put him in the G League or whatever, or on a two-way. There's no real issue with drafting him at 53 or whatever it was. Like I said, it's the end of the second round. What are you gonna do? But I started to get really encouraged by Juzang around March or April of last year, and we'll see how training camp shakes out for both of them. Johnny Juzang on a non-guaranteed contract coming into the year. Watch a couple clips of John Tonje dribbling the basketball. You'll see what I mean. He's got like this real, just like, almost like when Spice Adams does videos of like dribbling the basketball, and it's like a parody of how NBA players actually dribble the basketball. He's like Derrick Rose without the speed or the craft. He's just dribbling hard and moving his legs everywhere, and it's funny. I promise you. Jazz also signed a two-way after the draft. R.J. Lewis. You most know R.J. Lewis as he played for St. John's, going 3 for 17 in the NCAA tournament. His last game in the NCAA tournament against Arkansas. And while he was the Big East Player of the Year for St. John's, he was benched in that 3 for 17 game. And Pitino said after the fact that he wanted to choose, he benched Luis because he wanted players that he could trust more, and he felt were giving better effort, which is alarming for a player of Luis's caliber who was the Big East Player of the Year. And you like that. Look, if you're 3 for 17, if you're missing, keep shooting, right? Like, it's if you're the star, you're the star. But he isn't a particularly great shooter. Only 33% from 3. He loves shooting mid-rangers and can't make them. So his path to success is going to be defensively. Got to be a good defender. Vicini had a note in his profile of Luis that at the draft combine, he turned a lot of heads in the wrong way, in the wrong direction, because every time he was given the basketball, he shot it, and he had the most turnovers out of any player at the combine. The dude's a 6'6", wing defender. What is he like? He doesn't understand his role, I don't think. I read an interview that he had with a draft media scout kind of guy, and he said like, I really think I can be an NBA All-Star. I don't see myself as a complimentary piece. I'm going to start out as a complimentary piece, but I really see myself being the focal point of an NBA franchise. And it's like, buddy, like, you are projected to go in the late second round or undrafted. Maybe cool it a little bit. So I don't see the appeal right now, except the toolsy 6'6" guy. Again, another Rick Pitino guy, right? We had a Clayton and Iona with Rick Pitino, and now we got Rick Pitino here in St. John's. I I think he made a good leap this year, and he scored 18 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. He's got good college stats from a counting stats perspective, but the efficiency was awful, and we'll see. He's got to start on defense, and he does have some defensive chops, so we'll see. We will see with RJ Lewis. He will be on a two-way for Utah this year, unless we replace him with a different two-way, which can happen over the course of the summer. As usual, I went longer than I expected, but I wanted to give you a full rundown on Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton, Paul Tonje, and RJ Lewis. But Ace Bailey is going to be the star of the show. I can't wait to hear the press conferences next week. And I can't wait for Summer League to see what Ace Bailey can do in a more normal environment where, he's still going to be the star of the show in Summer League, but playing with second-year players, playing with third-year players, perhaps. We'll see how Utah crafts their Summer League team and seeing how he fits alongside those players. And alongside unlike Rutgers, the worst players on the Summer League team are still going to be professional-ass basketball players who may not stick on an NBA roster or anything, but they're going to be players who are way better than anything he played with at Rutgers. Can he play in a team environment? It's going to be very interesting. He's got all this skills and talent. Can't wait for it. We got a little Patty Mills replacement in Walter Clayton, who's got championship pedigree. I forgot to invoke Jared Butler's name earlier, but they're very different players, I think. But yeah, undersized guard who won a championship. Okay, we'll see. That's kind of where the similarities end for the two of them. But you can see that that's where we're thinking this. We thought Jared Butler was the steal of the draft, by the way, way back when. Tonje, a little linebackery dribbling type that reminds me a lot of even little Dylan Brooksy, perhaps, a little bit shorter than Dylan Brooks, a 6-year senior who perhaps can raise the competitiveness of the team in practices and the G League and that sort of thing. Very, very, very good shooter with good form, has good NBA range, but really struggles getting with athleticism and speed, and a lot of his offensive game in college probably can't translate to the NBA because he's not going to draw the physical fouls that he used to. And RJ Lewis, toolsy defender in college who had a auspicious end to his career playing poorly on the offensive end, and is only going to stick in the NBA if he can be a great defender who can do something offensively. This has been a Salt City Hoops show. Salt City Hoops. I'm Mark Pereira. I will talk to you very, very soon to do an off-season preview because we got some. We want to talk about the Jazz and targets and what other teams should be looking for with the Jazz. So I will talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed learning about the newest Jazzmen on the team. I can't wait to learn more about them. Good night.